Well, hello there and welcome to another exciting edition of the Fourth Estate on View Sasa. My name is Waihiga Mwaura. Many thanks indeed for staying with us. Now, I'd like to introduce my guest in studio, even as we take a look at the state of media and how media interacts with those in power on today's episode. Right next to me, Phillip Etale, Director of Communication, ODM. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And on the far right, Senior Director, Digital Innovations and Diaspora Comms, Dennis Itumbi. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, many thanks for finding time to be here with us. Let me start a quote by reading to you a quote by American broadcaster and journalist, investigative journalist Amy Goodman. She said of journalists, "It is not our job to cozy up to power or to be comfortable with power. We are supposed to be the checks and balance of those who are in power." I want to get your take on that statement. I can start with you, Phillip.
I couldn't agree more with the lady because in any democracy, the success of any state depends on the ability by the media to articulate issues, report factual issues without intimidation, coercion, or aligning with either side of the political divide. In mature democracies, the media, or rather the freedom of the press, is considered one of the basics in terms of nurturing and developing democracies in those countries. And I believe if that can be adopted in third world countries, which Kenya belongs, Kenya can be a very, very interesting democracy. Okay,
fair enough. Let me get an opening statement from you.
I would agree and say later Thomas Jefferson, a former US president, actually improved it. He actually said, or was he to choose between a government without newspapers or newspapers without government, he would settle for the latter. I can't agree more.
You can't agree more. Short and sweet. If that is the case, both of you have at times on your social media platforms accused the media of being not factual, showing bias, perpetuating fake news, etc. If that is the case, then technically, if we are to buy into what Amy Goodman has said, and of course you've quoted another, someone else, then technically both of you are not supposed to be happy with media, because media should be keeping your employers in check.
Well, I think to some extent the media is trying, but what we hear, from where I sit, I think there's some background force that is trying to muzzle that freedom of the media, either directly or indirectly.
Where's the background force coming from?
I can say, you know, there are the so-called media owners. And, you know, media owners are in business. They set up these facilities to make money and also create employment. So for them to ensure that they have enough money for their employees, they have to
transact, do business.
What they are being told, or rather what they're dictated to, what is dictated to them by those in power. In terms of businesses, you know, 60%, and my brother can attest to it, 60% of media advertisements are government-based. So for you to get these government-based advertisements, you know, from county governments to parastatals to ministries to the executive itself, even the presidency, where my brother works, you have to lie low and listen to what they say. And that's what is killing that neutrality that we want from these journalists. You know, a journalist who goes to a training school to train as a journalist is told to be impartial. And when they get employment, they expect to exercise what they are taught by the teachers in school.
Although, Phillip, again, on your Twitter handle, many times you've questioned this notion of journalists being impartial, saying by being impartial, they are hiding the truth by attempting to please both sides. And I've seen that on your handle quite a few times.
I don't think I've ever questioned the neutrality of any journalist. What I always question...
You don't feel media hides under the banner of neutrality?
What I always question is the employer. I always say, perhaps if it's this media house, perhaps they have a policy that they should do this, they should have their journalists do that, you know, such kind of stuff. And that's what I believe a journalist, a well-trained journalist, who believes in the calling, because journalists are supposed to be the mirror of the society. Okay. They're supposed to speak for the less, the people, the folks out there in the rural, you know. Because without the media,
yes,
my grandmother or my grandfather cannot get to know what is happening in Nairobi or elsewhere.
Fair enough. Dennis, come in.
Well, let me put it this way. Government is not interested in getting good stories. Government is interested in getting the right stories told. So we will not use our capacity for advertisement, which is a legal requirement, by the way, that you must advertise across two world circulating, countrywide circulating outlets of media. So it is not only an outlet that is based on controlling stories, it is actually enshrined in the law. We are not interested in using that to get good stories for government to look good. We are interested in getting the right stories. Because when media ceases to be a functional microscope of what is going on, then you will never be able to know what is a bacteria and what is a virus that is eating things that are being done in government on behalf of the people. So the accusation that people in power are using the advertising muscle to be able to control what media houses publish is so much away from the truth. As to media ownership, I'm telling my brother in ODM, we are in digital migration now for the last 2 years. Start your own TV. Put it out there. And that way you're able to tell your stories if you feel the mainstream media is not telling your stories. By Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, and Instagram accounts on their own, you have a very high readership and viewership, more than you'll ever even get from mainstream media on a single event. Because if Etale posts something on an ODM platform now, and it is viewed by over 1 million people, that is higher than the shared viewership of media houses in one event, for instance, 7 p.m. news. Even though 1 million people are watching news, they are divided in different segments. So all that ODM needs to do is to start their own platform where people can be able to see. In fact, if I'm not wrong, Raila Odinga has more than 1 million followers on Facebook.
Okay.
So he's a media owner himself.
As I listen to the both of you, if I was a foreign media student watching this interview, I would say that you two gentlemen are fighters for media independence. You know, you're standing up for true media in Kenya. But let me also pose another question to you. There are those who say that the two of you are now partially responsible for declining levels of journalism in this country. Why do I say so? Because you use your positions of influence, both in opposition and in power, to slant the facts in favor of your preferred parties through propaganda. How would you respond to that? Dennis, let me start with you. Let me say this. First of all, propaganda is not a bad thing. When you're working for a political party or you're working for government, propaganda is a good thing. In fact, propaganda, when you go to school, propaganda is taught in two ways. There is positive propaganda and there is negative propaganda. How do you balance propaganda with your media training? Because media training, actually one of the biggest topics, by the way, in media training is propaganda. When you're covering, in fact, even when you're covering media houses, when a media house is covering, for instance, a death of a person in that media house, that is advancing something that is propaganda, but it's positive propaganda. It is not news in effect. Sorry, just say that again. When a media house is covering what? If Dennis Itumbi works for Citizen TV, and Citizen TV covers the death of my sister and that burial. But it's a fact. It is propaganda, because let me tell you, what is news? News should have a basis of facts, or give me your definition. Exactly, that's what I meant. News is something that is fresh and does not affect the person telling the story. That is news. You cannot go to a news bulletin and tell us about Mwaura getting married. That is propaganda in effect. It's trying to tell us that the people in this station are doing very well. They are having this particular kind of things, and that is why, by the way, most media houses now, especially print, even have a gossip column. You go to the Star, they have a gossip column. You go to Palava, which is in Standard, they have a gossip column. You go to Sunday Nation, they have a gossip column. Some have even gone further and introduced that gossip outlet, the Nairobian, which comes out on every Friday. It has become part of media houses. Can I take you back to my question? Yes, I was trying to illustrate the frame that actually propaganda is good. How then have we done a slant during the execution of our duties? That is what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to tell our stories in our slant. Does your slant help media in Kenya? Very well. It actually helps media. It actually helps media understand our story in deeper detail. In these ways, by aligning journalists with your political parties, you're helping media? It is up to the journalists to decide whether or not to go with that story as it's written, or to go out of the frame of it and do further research before telling the story. It is not my job as a media person attached to a certain political thinking to interpret
news for journalists. Mine is to tell my story as I want it told. It is up to the media house to decide, do we want to tell it the way Dennis is telling it, or do we want to slant it? But I will aggressively, every morning when I wake up, I worry like the lion in the jungle.
Do you still, would you still consider yourself a journalist?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Philip, are you still a journalist?
Yes, I am, and happily so. But on the issue of propaganda, I will agree with my brother that propaganda is part of our daily lives. You know, in politics, because where we sit, we cannot do what the mainstream media is doing. What a journalist is supposed to do is not what we can do. Because
okay, so you agree that there should be a difference?
As political communicators, you know, we don't work for media houses anymore. We work for political parties, and, you know, he works for the government. And, you know, where he sits, he's obliged to do that what he believes can suit the interests of his side. Same to me. So when you come up with something, perhaps, you know, propaganda is, when I was doing communication, perhaps, like last year, there's a lecturer of mine who teaches us political communication and propaganda. And he tells us, when you go out there as a political communicator, you should think outside the box. Don't think like that normal journalist who sits down in the editorial meeting with the editors and they're told, this is the angle of the story.
So were you thinking...
Do something that is different.
Were you thinking outside the box when you wrote on your Facebook handle, which has large following, that Dennis Itumbi, the man sitting next to you, has organized for online hate against you because of what happened at Waihiga House? Was that fact or was that propaganda?
You see...
yes or no question?
Let me tell you what made me get angry. You know, there was that video that was edited, and I believe it was...
edited in what ways?
It was done by my brother here and his team, because they're the ones who posted it, plus they're politicians. When that incident happened at the Waihiga Democratic Movement headquarters, I was inside the tent where the meeting was going on.
Now you're giving us fact, not propaganda.
I'm stating facts as they are.
Okay, just
I'm just putting the record straight because it has really injured me. A lot of people have been calling me from both sides of the political divide. Others have been insulting me, you know, with using heavy words, you know, and adjectives that they can imagine. So what I did, when there was a commotion, the Honorable Chris Omalwa, who was sitting next to me, and Honorable Ladwa, told me, Etale, there's something happening there, and you know, the bosses are here, and the meeting is going on. Can you go and check and find out? So I found people shouting, making noise. So I started shoving them away, you know, pushing, telling, "Tokeni hapa bana, you know, you're making noise." Then when I looked on my left, I saw my brother, Francis Gashuri, whom I respect so much. We've worked together for long, you know, and we always interact. Gashuri and I talk, and we meet, we can do coffee, you know, brotherly. So I took my brother into the meeting room, and in fact, he sat on the high table because there were no seats.
In Kalonzo Musyoka's office?
No. Before I took him to Kalonzo Musyoka's office.
Okay.
He sat there for about 5 minutes. He was so tensed, he was frightened, and I could see he also had anger in him because that's something that had never happened to him before.
Can we fast forward to the video that you accuse Itumbi of editing? How was that video edited? We've seen it. We've seen you raising your hands.
Yes.
Who are you raising your hands to?
The people who were shouting, who wanted to rough up my brother Gashuri. So I went out there and I was like, okay, you guys, what are you doing? Because I didn't know.
But your hands
they were
weren't,
attacking.
your hands were
I was pushing them away because they were surging towards the tent where the meeting was. You see?
Okay, I'm coming to
And naturally, anybody can do that.
So the chorus
I did what I could humanly do.
Mwende Bomas, you are not joining the Mwende Bomas.
No, I didn't even I didn't even say anything about Mwende Bomas. In fact, that one I had from I would call them political detractors.
Okay.
I had them like posting that I said, you know, we are friends, but politically, we have different ideologies. So he can attack me, I can attack him, but that's That's neither here nor there.
Let me get a chance now to respond. You've been accused of editing a video.
They edited because, you know, it was posted by him, then Senator Murkomen, and people from DP's office, communication guys from DP's office. And that one, I took it so personal. I called them and told them, Chief, couldn't you even ask me? You should have called me to ask what was happening. They just said, now they branded me another title.
Okay.
Head of militia, communication head of the militia group. I don't know what militia means to them. The
Itumbi, did you carry out a smear campaign against this man?
You know, I don't have cameras attached to ODM. So any footage that comes from ODM functions must come from people who are either covering ODM or from ODM itself. He actually admits that the whole video was as was. I mean, throwing the hands as was. The only thing
he says you edited it.
But he admits every occurrence of that video was as was. He has not pointed out any part of the video that was not factual.
You see,
what was the issue with the video?
My issue with the video, you know, when I got out there, you know, I cannot start shouting in front of, I'm a journalist. I worked in a media house, I've worked here, I've been a reporter of repute, you know. Why should I go out there in full glare of cameras? I saw cameramen holding their cameras. Then I was like, okay, if I wanted to rough up my friend, if I had organized this thing, why would I? You know, if you want, in politics, and he'll agree with me, if you have organized something against someone, you don't appear there. You know? You don't. But me, to be accused of having instigated, or rather organized these boys to rough up. In fact, it came to me, I shed a tear actually, because I've never imagined that in my life, as a journalist, and as a person who works with politicians, can ever do something of that magnitude.
You come in now.
You know, you can sway 1,000 men by appealing to their prejudice, but it is more difficult to convince one just by logic. That video was factual. Etale has sat here, he has explained, he has not disputed that the video, he has not shown any part of the video that was not factual. What he disputes is the captions that accompanied the video.
True.
And he has actually admitted that.
Did you work on the captions? Was it your team?
I mean, I put up the video and I asked a question.
Yes or no?
No.
So
he's a chief propagandist for that side.
My update was a question. Phillip Etale, you mean you are involved in kicking out journalists?
Why didn't you call him and ask him? He
Yes,
says
man.
you have your number. He says you're good friends.
I actually communicated to him via Facebook, because Facebook is also a communication medium.
You should have called me, because, you know, Facebook
I had options.
is not reachable to many.
Let him finish. Go ahead.
I had an option to either call him, tweet him, or put up on my Facebook update. I did one of the three. So I got in touch with him. But that's not even most important about that issue. If Etale is sitting here and saying that that was a foul thing to be done to journalists, let him, after this interview, walk to the nearest police station, I believe is Kilimani, and record a statement naming giving a list of the people who were in that meeting, because he was there, he's the one who stopped them, giving up the statement and giving up their names and their contacts, because he has them. They got into a meeting and they were recorded to get into that meeting. Let him give all their names and also identify them on the video and say he stopped them to do that particular. That will be the best thing he can do for journalists, because the DPP has ordered for investigations.
Okay, good.
So
You've asked a question.
Dennis,
you can answer
Dennis,
now.
let me tell you one thing. The meeting was for members of parliament, both Senate and the National Assembly. It was a parliamentary group meeting. So though any other person who came to that meeting uninvited, I had no control over. And I can say it anywhere else. I had no control over anybody else who came to that meeting, apart from the invited members.
Apart from
the
writing,
PG, the parliamentary group team.
comprehensive statements on your social media platform, what else have you done to try and rectify this situation?
Exactly.
To ensure that it never happens?
I reported immediately after that happened.
Because
after I took
as a trained journalist, you understand how those journalists feel,
Waihiga,
but you also now are in a position of authority.
After all that, after ensuring that Gashuri was safe and handed him over to his colleagues out there who were shouting, saying that, no, we have to have a brother here. I took him to the fellow journalists and told them, here he is, he's very safe. And he acknowledged it. He said, Etale, thank you very much. Now, after that, I went straight to my boss, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga and told him, actually...
And we've seen his statement.
Yes.
Have you
and
talked to the police?
I reported to him. I told him there are some guys who came here and have attacked so and so.
Okay.
And this is not acceptable. And he made a public apology on behalf of the NASA coalition. And he said he had spoken to the MD of Citizen, of Royal Media, and the matter was put to rest.
So you feel that there's no need to follow up on that matter?
I'm reading mischief in the whole thing from where my brother sits and his colleagues and all those politicians. Because yesterday, I'm revealing it for the first time. The Senator Kipchumba Murkomen called me. Actually, he was one of those who reposted the video that my brother had posted. And he had said, nimesema, akwende bomas. I can never say such a thing.
Oh, he called you and told you?
No, he told me, you know, in politics, it's never that serious, you know. You had put a post on Facebook. Don't put many posts about the same thing. But, you know, I did that repeatedly because I was so angered. I had a difficult night. I couldn't sleep. I was thinking because I have never been taught by my mother to be violent.
Okay.
And he knows I can never be violent.
Etale, just 1 minute. Etale could not sleep. Yet, he has not done anything for those goons who beat up Gashuri.
I don't know those goons.
You're accusing him of playing to the gallery?
Yes, he's playing to the gallery. He has not recorded a statement with the police to say that he witnessed the event. It is a factual event that Gashuri was wrapped up.
Okay, let me throw a question.
And that was wrapped up by ODM goons, ODM militia goons.
Are they ODM goons? Who says the ODM goons?
But they got into the gates of ODM. You didn't stop them from getting into the gates. And even after the event, by the way, you did not kick them out of the event.
Okay, I think I've given you both sufficient time to talk. Let me now ask a question to you, Dennis. You know the tough political times we live in. You know the tension in this country. How hard would it have been to wait, call him, ask him for the facts? You talk about system, your facts, over and over again on your platform. Would it have been that difficult?
I used the platform which was fastest at that point to reach to him. I asked a question. Mr. Phillip Etale, were you actually involved in kicking out?
But you've seen the comments on your post.
And by the way, if you look back at Facebook, one of the things I did after I spoke to Gashuri is I brought down that post. So in terms of reducing the tensions, and after the question was answered, it had served its purpose. So I brought it down.
Okay, why did you bring down that post?
Because it was a question. Because it was a question, and the question was answered.
You should have sustained it if you confidently posted it.
The question was not answered on that platform, it was answered on another platform. It would therefore have been unfair to sustain the question on a platform where it was not answered.
Should you apologize to him?
No, why should I apologize?
He says you maligned him, you and your team.
I asked a question. The question was eventually answered, not by him, by the way, but by Gashuri. So, I mean, there was no apology to make.
You see,
there's something in journalism that's called question headlines. When you do a question headline, by the way, you cannot be sued for defamation. It is an absolute...
That was going to be my next question.
It is an absolute defense in defamation. It was a question. If the question was sufficiently answered, and I believe that it contradicted the facts, or contradicted the view that would have been slanted by the question, then the best thing for me was to delay it. If it was a media house, the best thing for them would have been to bring down and explain through a correction. But on social media, most people don't read the terms of use for social media we are in. On Facebook, one of the best ways to apologize is to bring down a post.
So that was your apology. Do you accept that apology?
You know, if before I accept the apology, if someone does something and they believe that that thing is factual, whatever they've posted, whatever video they've put on social media is factual. You let it there. Let it be there for as long as you want it to be. If you pull it down, then that means that you are guilty, that particular post was infactual, and I would say actually it was so injurious to me, to my person, and even those who believe in me. They were so mad. I just refrained my friends on social media from, going full throttle to attack my brother. I just told them, I'll handle it myself. I'll put up a statement, and I'll correct it. I'll say what happened. You know, what outraged me was the fact that after this post by Itumbi and others, my brother Gashuri was not online. So at some point, because I tried as much as possible to to get his attention through the same forum. He could not until around 3 p.m. Was it 3 a.m.? That's when he came online and he made that apology. Then for all these hours, from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m., those are about 12 hours, I had been beaten, I had been insulted, I had been told all sorts of things. And that was so bad. And a person who believes in telling the truth, I felt that was quite a big lie.
Okay, finally, I'll give you both 1 minute for a parting shot. But before that, now that you've gone through an experience where you say you were maligned by others who did not have all the facts, as Director of Communications, ODM, with a lot of people who follow you, how different will you now approach allegations that you hear? Because I follow you, quite closely. I see you tweeting about TV interviews, questioning this, questioning that. What will you now do differently? Because you say you are the victim of, non-facts.
Waihiga, have I ever tweeted anything negative about you?
No.
Because you do your job perfectly well. I follow your interviews every morning on Citizen Extra, sometimes on Power Breakfast. I think you carry out research before you go on that set. But there are those journalists who go there with ego, that I want to pin down this particular person because it doesn't belong to my school of thought. Those are the people that I always question, and I'll continue doing that. Because if we don't, even him, if he sees somebody, a journalist, asking a question that is rhetoric, in media terminologies, is that rhetoric question, He'll question. He'll say, this journalist, I think so-and-so, I think he went wrong here. Please do research before you get on that particular show. So I just want to encourage journalists, when they go out there in the field or in the studio, please always be sure of the questions that you're going to ask. And perhaps try to exercise some neutrality, even if you have your political inclination in your heart. Please keep it to yourself.
Okay.
Don't bring it forth so that, Kenyans watch. And as in a situation we are in now, Kenya is divided and it needs leadership.
Okay, fair enough.
And he can agree with me.
Yes.
We need leadership to bring Kenyans together, because as we are now, there's that particular group of Kenyans who feel like, I don't subscribe to this kind of system. And those who believe that, they have that sense of
good
ownership.
I think you've made it clear. I'll have to take that as your last parting statement. And you, Dennis?
The United Nations in 2013 identified November the 2nd, which is a day today, as a day for safety of journalists. I believe media houses need to invest a lot more on the safety of journalists. What we saw on that day, other than just the physical harassment of the journalist, there is also the health bit. I mean, here is a harassed journalist, but there is no first aid kit, even on your OB vans for even painkillers or stuff like that. There needs to be a proper investment on journalists as human beings, and also to psychological trauma. Journalists in this country covered 2007, 2008. They have covered demonstrations. There has been no clear way on how we handle these things across newsrooms. It is something that needs investment. And to finally say this, journalism is the first script of history. So everything that happens is good for our history and our reading, so that those who come after us, generations after, have something to refer to, a proper script. Okay. You and me have a role. Let's write the script.
Let's write the script. 10 seconds.
A journalist who stands up to intimidation and says, I want to do the right thing, is worth the name. And finally, I want to say this. Journalists have been harassed in opposition and in government. There's this lady, this photographer, who was who was almost strangled by the ADC to the president. Rashid Ronald was slapped and manhandled by GSUs in Kisumu. So many journalists. That one is never reported. We need to protect our journalists. We need systems that can ensure that the freedom of the press is upheld and journalists work freely. Fair
enough. Clearly, we need to protect journalists from both sides of the political divide. And they've both admitted it. That's how we wrap up this program. Many thanks indeed for watching The Fourth Estate on View Sasa. Download the app in Google Play Store. Have a look. We have a fresh episode every day. My name is Waihiga Mwaura. We'll see you again tomorrow.